Okay, now we're going to start with the fingerboard, and I've selected a nice piece of rosewood here for the blank, and you need to determine which side of the grain looks best and which surface you want to be the front and which one the back. And also make sure you've got one that's the right thickness. It needs to be at least 1/4 of an inch, or about 6 to 7 millimeters. Now I'm going to start with a plane, and we're just going to smooth the back side and make sure it mates with the neck properly. I'm just going to double check and make sure I've still got the right thickness here. And now determine which end is going to be to the neck and which side is going to be toward the guitar body. And I'm just going to square off a piece here. This is going to be the top, which is next to the headstock. And I just want to saw a piece off square. Sometimes, you know, the milled end from the lumber company, wherever you get your wood from, may not be perfectly square. This way we've got a nice square end to start with. And now I'm going to make that nice dark line in the grain as sort of a center point. And I'm going to put a center line down here that sort of lines up with that mark. And make sure you've got room that you get the proper width if you do something like this. This piece had a kind of a unique grain pattern to it. And I want to mark off the width at the nut. You can see the marks I've made there. On this rosewood, sometimes it can be kind of hard to see a pencil line. And then I'm going to measure down to the 12th fret. Then I'm going to square that line there where the 12th fret will be, and we'll mark the width of the neck at that spot. And as you can tell, the neck is going to taper from the nut down to the body of the guitar. There's my line at the 12th fret. And now once I've got my width established, here I've put the center point in, and then I'll just measure out how wide I want that. And then you just sort of connect the dots, and you can see a little better here how this taper goes. See how it gets a little wider there at toward the nut, tapers down toward the body. Do that on the other side as well. And now we're going to set up what's called a shooting plane. I'm just taking a piece of 1x, and we're going to plane off this edge of the fingerboard. And I'm going to set the fingerboard on top of this scrap piece of wood so that it overhangs that slightly. You can see there's probably an inch or 2.5 millimeters of room there. Then I'm going to clamp this down to the table. And then I'm going to take my plane on a side and start planing that. And the way this is set up, this should still keep the edge at 90 degrees to the top surface. And then you just want to start taking off all the excess wood there until you get down to that taper line. And you can see here how it's how the finished product looks. Okay, now we're going to work on the end toward the body that comes down to the sound hole. And there's a diagram in the plans that'll show you a little bit better what I'm measuring here. But I'm just extending the center line down toward the body, like past the 12th fret. And then that's my 12th fret line you're looking at there. And then I'm going to draw that circle on just a piece of cardstock. The diameter's in the plans, and I'm just going to cut the diameter here and cut half that circle out, and make sure you've still got that radius line there so that you can line that up with that center line. You see here how that's going to line up and give me the right arch. This is the same arch that will match the circle of the sound hole where the fretboard meets that rosette. Then I'm just going to pencil this in. And now, note, this isn't the 12th mark that you're looking at here, the 12th fret mark. I've measured down from there to put this in. And you can see better here how that arch is going to match up with the rosette on the actual guitar. Then I'm just going to take a coping saw and cut that curve out. Then I'm going to test the fit and just make sure I'm happy with that curvature. And I've also, when you're doing this, make sure you've got the nut in place so you are getting an accurate measurement. Then I'm just going to take some sandpaper and clean this inside edge up. Alright, and there we have our blank that we're now going to work on the compound radius. And for this guitar, toward the nut, I'm using a 7.5 inch radius. See how the radius forms here. And toward the body, it will end up being a 12 inch radius at that end. Now I'm going to use some 100 grit paper, and I'm going to start with the 7.5 inch radius and just start sanding that radius into the top surface. And remember that you don't really apply a lot of pressure there at the body end. You really want it to focus on the nut end. And then once you're getting to where that radius is in at the top, turn the fingerboard around and we'll start working with the 12 inch radius on the body side of the fingerboard. And I'll kind of work back and forth here with the two. And at this point I'm going to start working a little more that transitional area in between the two. And I kind of go back and forth between the 7.5 and the 12 inch block until I get a nice smooth transition between the two. When I'm working in here, I'm not really going toward each end. And you can see this is the nut end at the 7.5 inch radius, and at the other end we have the 12. And now periodically test your fingerboard and make sure that you've got a nice straight line all the way down. and it should stay flat across the width of the fingerboard. If you've got any gaps there, you'll need to work those out.